Hi, everybody. Welcome to our student panel event for this is International Open Education Week. My name is Jennifer Pate, and I am the director of OpenEd here at the University Libraries at Texas A&M. We're very grateful to have partnered with SGA, and they helped us get together a panel of students to talk about the importance of using open educational resources and what it means for their classes to be affordable. So I'm going to sit off to the side because the focus should be on our students and what they have to say. I'll be asking the questions and they'll be answering, and I hope you all learned something, and we'll save time at the end for Q&A, and we hope you guys have thought of some really great questions for everybody. Try to stump them. Maybe. No, don't do that. Okay, so let's get started. And I'm just going to say we're going to start at this end and work our way down. And if you can just introduce yourself, like your year, your major, and explain how you got involved with open educational resources.
Howdy, my name is Iman Vagger. I'm a political science major, class of 2027, AAA. And I got involved and interested in open education resources, not from the advocacy side. That's like what some of my wonderful co-panelists have got involved in, but just by virtue of taking classes that were open education, and then also taking classes that maybe weren't, and where I had to pay for my education resources. And so that's kind of what pushed me to come to this panel and share my perspective and opinion on it.
Howdy, my name is Kemi Dada. I'm a sophomore psychology major, and I got involved with open education resources just through being involved in academic affairs as a part of student government. And right now we're working on the Open Education Resources Awards, which has got me familiar with the topic, and yeah, that's how I got involved.
Howdy, my name is Dylan Cooper. I am an English major, and I'm class of 2026, and I will be graduating this May. And I got involved kind of the same way Iman did. I took some classes that I knew were OER, and I was invited this semester to help write an open educational resource. So that's really where I got a lot of my information about this from.
Howdy, y'all. My name is Robert Hargrove. I am a junior education major here at the university, and I kind of got involved in open educational resources through my work in advocacy with open educational resources in our Student Government Association. I'm also an active taker of open educational resource courses, just because they help me save money, and I very much enjoy getting the opportunity to have an accessible and affordable education here on this university.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So next, we're going to this is an open question for everybody on the panel, so we'll just work our way down again. Can you discuss at least one course or class where you used an OER and how that worked, and do you feel like it contributed to your success in that class?
Yeah, currently I'm in the works of pursuing an Arabic studies minor, and an Arabic professor that I have, Ustada Lamia, as we call her, uses completely free and accessible resources for her students, and it really provides a more dynamic learning environment. We're using videos, we're using articles, we're using lectures, and we're using different sources of education materials, and I find that it provides a more well-rounded education, and it's allowed me and my fellow classmates to really immerse ourselves into the classes that we're taking. And learning a language, it really requires kind of a beyond the book learning, and having it be affordable, having it be accessible is an added plus to that, of course. So yeah, I think beyond the aspect of it, being affordable, being completely free, it's provided me with a way more well-rounded immersion in the Arabic language.
One of the classes this semester that I'm taking that is OER, or Open Education Resources, is my psychological disorders class. And for me, I'm a psychology major and I want to pursue clinical psychology. So this class is very crucial for what I want to do in the future. And she provides us with a free, basically PDFs of the textbook. So we have a free textbook to our disposal. And that's really been good for me because I'm able to supplement my learning within the lectures with the textbook. And since this is a class I'm genuinely really interested in, it's helped me be able to apply the stuff I learned to this class outside of the class. It helps me remember the stuff I learn in class better because I'm able to use my textbook as well. And I know in the past, I have been haven't really bought the textbook because I'm oh, this is $100. I can't just put that towards a textbook. So it's made me be able to be more immersed in the class by having this resource available to me.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of the same. I've taken a couple classes, English, that are cross-sectional, either like film or women and gender studies, where the prof gave us this open educational resource, and it made the stress of like finding the right textbook and getting it on time and making sure you have the money to get it really went down. And it's also a great resource, I think, if you want to expand. Maybe it's not your primary resource, but it is a great extra help. I know I've spent my time studying for these classes with them, and so, yeah.
Yeah. For me, I've taken a number of open educational resource courses here at this university. One of the most notable for me was my Texas history course. For that course, our book was completely from the libraries, was completely an open educational resource textbook. And on top of that, we got exposure to a whole bunch of literature that was also provided from the libraries as well. It helped me kind of connect the literature to our content and kind of give me the exposure to the different types of content that we were learning and kind of the history of Texas and the different events that took place. And so I was really able to connect the things I was learning within my open educational resource course and those textbooks that were being used to what I really needed and needed to apply to get a good grade in the course.
Great, thank you. So this next question is for anybody who wants to answer, and if you all want to answer, that's fine too. Have you ever considered not taking a class because you knew that the course materials were going to be high, and you knew that you were going to have to pay a lot of money to take that course? And that includes, you know, books, workbooks, lab manuals, access codes, packbacks, things like that. Has there ever been, like, you've looked at a class and you thought, no, I can't afford that this semester?
Personally, for me, I can say yes. There have been times when I register and I specifically look at the syllabus, if it is provided, what the materials for those courses are. And I look to see how much I can pay because I, like a lot of students on this campus, are a college student. We're on a very low income. We're spending a lot of our money on tuition, on just keeping ourselves sheltered and here at this university. So I can say that I have specifically chosen classes before and decided not to take classes because of the costs that were associated with that course.
Yeah, for me also, there have been times that I think earlier this semester I actually like removed a course like during ad drop week because I realized that the textbook that it had was like kind of pricey, and I was just kind of like, well, you know, maybe right now I'm probably not gonna, you know, wanting to take this class, especially because of the lack of affordability. Again, like going off of what Robert's talking about, like as students, like we're paying for so much outside of just like our classes, and so it's like tuition, housing, rent, food, groceries, and so it just kind of seemed like unfeasible at the time. And I was just like, well, there's another class I could probably take out there that might have an open education resource.
I actually really agree with that, like the fact that students are paying for so many other things like beyond just school. So for me this semester, I had an elective that I was interested in taking, and then I saw how many things I had to pay for, like packbag, Pearson, textbook, for like one class that was not related to my major. So even though I was like very interested in this class and really wanted to learn more about the topic, I was like, okay, it's probably not the best financial decision for me to take this class, even though I think it's important to take things outside of your major and broaden your knowledge. I think it's especially like when you're paying for so many things outside of just school, that decision is not feasible for like a lot of students.
Yeah, they summed it up pretty nice.
Great. So kind of piggybacking off that, since Robert, you mentioned that when you register for a class, if the syllabus is available, you go and you look at the syllabus to see what materials are there. Do you ever look when you're registering in the Howdy portal to see if courses are marked OER? Because that's a Texas state law that we're supposed to be marking courses that are OER with that OER designation. Is that something that you all do, or did you know about it, or do you think that we need to do more work to publicize that for students?
I would say my freshman year, I had no clue that that was a thing. That was not something I was looking for. But as I got more involved with open educational resources and within the Student Government Association, I was looking specifically for those markers on those courses within our Howdy portal and our registration system, just because I, as a student, want to save as much as I possibly can on my textbooks. And I definitely think that is something students need to become more aware of, and we need to publicize a little bit more. But it is such a great way for students to be able to see, I'm going to save on this course. I'm going to be able to, afford this and this and this for this next semester instead of having to spend all this money on my next course.
I think from like the outside of like not being super involved in the advocacy of this and just being like a regular like a student, I actually honestly really didn't realize that there was an OER marker until maybe this semester when I was picking my classes. Last semester for this semester, and so I'd gone like my first semester freshman year, my second semester, and then this past fall without knowing that the OER logo existed or really just like understanding that it was something that was across the board. And so seeing it this past registration cycle, I was like, oh, this is a thing that I can maybe look out for. And so I think that it would definitely be helpful to publicize that a little bit more and get students more knowledgeable about, hey, this is a resource that not only is Texas A&M providing, but like it's a statewide thing, and it's for your benefit. Here's how you can access courses that have OER or open education resources.
I had a very similar experience like Iman and Robert. Like my freshman year, I didn't know about it. And even last semester, I didn't know about it. It was only when I got more involved in student governments through like the OER awards that I realized that, oh, you can like check your classes beforehand to see if they have the OER marker on it. And I think, I think the only reason I knew about this was because of my involvement in student government. And I feel like a lot of people in student government know about it, but if you're not involved in student government, then you're not really told about it. Like my roommates didn't even know what OER, Open Education Resources, was until like I expressed it to them because of my work with the OER awards.
Yeah, this is what, our sixth semester? This is our sixth semester, me and Robert's. And I had really no idea what an OER was, an open education resource was, until last semester when one of my profs was like, yeah, this is another resource that we use for this course. And that's how I got more interested and realized like, oh, I've taken one of these before.
So here's a question that's not on the sheet, but I want to ask now just because we're talking about this. If you were in the Howdy portal and all things were equal and say it was a history class and there were multiple sections of that history class and one was marked OER and one wasn't, would you be more inclined to take the class that was visibly marked for OER?
100%.
Knowing what it is?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
Good, that's the kind of stuff we want to hear. So next, and I'd kind of like to have the whole panel answer, so we'll start here and work our way down. Not to make you go last every single time, Robert, but it's just kind of the way it's working out. What has been your most impactful experience that you've had because your instructors have used OER? And this could be anything from a classroom impact, access impact, or it could be that because they were using open educational resources, you were able to afford something that maybe you would have had to budget for later. We have a survey that we've been doing, and we have a whiteboard downstairs, and we encourage you to go put that on there. We've had some really great responses like an Aggie ring and groceries and rotisserie chicken, believe it or not, was on that board as well, which, priorities, right? Because of OER, somebody could get a rotisserie chicken. So anything that has been particularly impactful for you because your professors chose to use OER in courses?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit before. It kind of just like on a learning level, it just makes for a really robust environment. You're not really just having to rely, and like while some professors use OER and it's just one textbook or one central learning resource, some professors are like leaning towards using a very wide variety of these resources, and so it makes for a really robust learning environment. Outside of that, not having to pay for things like textbooks and packback and all these different various ways that students have to spend money on education resources has like allowed me to afford groceries and like allowed me to think about, okay, maybe like a new pair of shoes for the school year, things like that, where it's just like, instead of having to put my scholarship money aside for books, I can use it for groceries and things that I actually really need to be a successful student outside of one-off classes. And so that's kind of what it's looked like for me a little bit.
I would say for me, the previous semesters, a lot of my classes have been like very expensive in the fact I have to buy textbooks and Pearson and things of that nature. But this semester, I've had almost only one class I've had to buy a textbook for. And I've really noticed the difference for me, like financially, as last semester I had to budget really tightly with anything. And I felt like if something went outside of my budget, it was like a major like stress for me. And I was like, oh, I can't go out here, I can't do this because like I had a tighter budget to stick to. But this semester, just not having to spend like $100, $200 on all these textbooks and all these different supplies, I've noticed that like that financial stress, like obviously budget's still like that smart, but I've noticed that I can buy things more freely, or like if I have to buy groceries, I'm like, oh, I want to treat myself and maybe buy a rotisserie chicken, as you were talking about. I can do that and not feel like, oh, this is going to be a financial burden for me. So.
Well, I am very lucky this year to have taken a lot of classes that rely on just books themselves. As an English major, I get to have a little more fun now. So the library is awesome. Go check out books from the library. But before then, OER is actually, I noticed a difference for just me and my family. My parents and my sister and I are lucky enough to both be supported by our parents to come to school at the same time. And that semester where where she was starting school and I was in school, we really had to talk about how we're going to manage this finances. And that was the first semester I took an OER, unknowingly. But not having to pay for like that extra coursework really, I think, made a difference.
For me, I came to college with my twin brother. So my parents are paying for both of our tuitions. My families are paying for both of us to be here and to live here. And so the cost for textbooks doubled because of the amount of coursework we were taking, both in separate programs and majors. So we were both taking separate courses. So open educational resources have really impacted me and my family in the fact that we now are more financially secure. You don't think about it a lot when you go to college, but you are having to spend money, $60, $100, $200 on textbooks and coursework that you're only going to need for maybe just one semester. And it racks up very, very fast. And so for me, one specific instance I can think of is my car has had a couple of repair issues that I've had to need to get fixed. And I think of it as I could not have fixed my car if I had to drop that money on, say, a textbook. And for me to be safe while driving back home, which is nearly 4 hours away, I think that was something that felt very important for me. And it was something like, how am I going to pay for this? And I'm glad that my professors and several of my courses that I've used have used open educational resources so that I could afford something like fixing my car.
So those are some great benefits. Can you think of any other benefits that you'd like to point out that you've had from using OER aside from those?
I think one thing I've noticed, and kind of getting to work with a prof who uses them often, is they're really accessible from a learning standpoint. A lot of times it seemed that they aren't tacked down in like the technical side of a lot of the courses, and if they are, it's an expansion on them, and it's really, I think, been helpful to get to be looking at that process and that it's meant for students and professors kind of across disciplines, and it's not bogged down by the technicalities of a course, and it helps expand, I think, access so you have this really great resource and you're not picking and choosing from different ones that might cost different amounts, kind of collective like that.
I would say in terms of accessibility, open educational resources really are more available than just a physical textbook copy. They're also available online, and being able to access those open educational resources at any time, even when I'm just like sitting in a passenger seat and getting to read my textbook on a long trip, those are really amazing ways for that to be accessible to me all year round, all semester round. And I can always, if I need to, go back to that textbook. If I'm in another course, for me, education, we do a lot of building up through our coursework, and so I can always look back at my foundational textbooks that were open educational resources and be able to rely on that knowledge and that information to continually help me improve on my education here at this university.
Yeah, I think they summed it up really well.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that when we talk about open education resources, they remain open, and you can, like you said, access them anytime. And I think back to when you would buy like a traditional textbook, you can keep that textbook if you want, You can give it to a friend, you can sell it back, make a little bit money back. But if you're using something like a Pearson or a Cengage, at the end of the semester, your access is cut off. And if you take, like if you're in a 101 and you take a 102, you can't refer back to that material that you had before. So being in a class that has that open educational resource allows you to go back and look at that foundational knowledge as you're building in those courses. So thank you for pointing that out. I think that's a really important point. So next I want to talk a little bit more about classroom experiences. There is part of the open education movement what we call open pedagogical practices, which is where students get to be involved in the creation of materials and their own learning environment, such as, I would really like to invite you to talk about the OER textbook that you're working on as well. So have you had any experience with that sort of thing in your classrooms with open pedagogy where you're not just what we call a disposable assignment. It's not just a test, you're done with it, you get your grade back, you throw it in the trash, it's disposable, you move on to the next thing. But it's something that maybe that you can keep and that you can build upon and that you're involved in, and you're working with others in the classroom and with your instructor to build that kind of knowledge base for yourself. And if you would start with your open education textbook, but then anybody else could chime in, please.
Sure. So we are kind of in the process of writing. We've got the first few weeks we spent just reading as many resources as we could get our hands on, and now we're kind of in the planning and starting to write phase. And one thing that my professors really emphasized for us is that this resource is, like, we want y'all to be really hands-on in writing it because it's for students. And oftentimes things written by students for students is one way to really connect and make it appetizing or digestible for students in a classroom. And I think working on it with other students, we get to, go in each other's like little drive folders and what we've learned, and like, hey, look at this one, like, hey, look at this one. And it's, we're covering each other and we're helping each other build this outside of a classroom. And then thinking inside the classroom, I know that this professor who I've taken a couple times, he loves to hear how he can improve. We get feedback at the end of every semester. He does a feedback and he's like, what's one thing you wish we would have expanded on, or how can I make something clearer? And now working with him, I know he takes that feedback really great, and I think an open educational resource is a really great way to build that kind of feedback loop and make things better and more accessible and more digestible to students.
I think for me specifically, I've been in classes before where we work on different methods and strategies for what we call ESL scaffolding. It's a very educational-based term, so I know some people may not know what that is, but it's a lot of scaffolding and help and structure to help students be able to learn who are English as a second language learner. And so we've created videos throughout our time in the class. We also create toolboxes, and year by year, those are processed and put through the course, and other students from other years are able to view those tools, are able to view those videos and get ideas for those scaffolding. It really becomes very pivotal when we go into our student teaching experiences that we get to use that scaffolding and kind of figure out ways that we can best help our elementary school students.
I would say for me, a really cool experience I got to have was in one of my entomology classes. We were able to go to an elementary school, and basically they brought some of the bugs I guess they have from in the lab, and we got to talk to elementary students about bugs to raise awareness that, okay, yeah, bugs look kind of scary, but they're actually don't just kill them, they're not gonna hurt you. So we got to talk to students about it, which was really cool. And through talking to students about it, I was able to learn more about it myself. And then also I think it was a really cool way, to have a hands-on perspective on what we were learning in class, and also get to hear questions from students. And honestly, I've had similar questions myself and get to either answer it or hear a grad student, we got to do with grad students, hear them answer it. And I think that's one of those elective classes that I feel a lot of people will take and then you'll forget it kind of later. But for me, there's so many things I learned in that class which I remember just because I was able to have that hands-on experience.
Yeah, again, like similar to what they're saying, like there have been so many times where I've been in a class that uses OER, like for example, like going back to my Arabic studies class, and I just like love that class, where I've been able to like look at workbooks that my professors like printed out or like exercises that my professors created for us in the class that allows for that immersion and allows for that learning environment to where, we're kind of not just like, we're able to build on learning because we have like these written workbooks that she's given us, not like a binded notebook, but really just like papers and papers that we're putting together and like online resources, that like allows me to look back because I'm in 102, so I can look back to my resources from 101 and build upon that. So I think that's a really cool way that I've been able to experience that one.
That's fantastic. I love to hear that kind of immersion and that building that knowledge base is so prevalent here on campus. So I love to hear that. So now I'd like to ask each of you, and we'll start with Robert this time at the end. We'll work our way back this way. So what do you think professors, maybe who don't use open education resources, need to know? What is like one of the most important things that you think that they need to know about why it is important for them to consider that for their classes?
Yeah, for sure. Personally, college is expensive. It's very expensive for a lot of students. The price of college keeps going up and up. The price of housing goes up and up. And with that, so does textbook costs, so do online resource costs as well. And so I would say to professors, like, your students are not going to be all wealthy. They're not going to have a lot of money. So know that if you assign something that costs money, your student may miss out on having the opportunity to access that. Personally, I've gone through courses before where I haven't bought the textbook and I've missed out on learning, and that may leave a deficit in my knowledge later on in life. So truly having those open educational resources available for students not only enables students to continue to learn, but also enables them to have that knowledge for later on in their life when they're applying the knowledge that they learn in college to their future career aspirations. I personally think open educational resources are very important, and I encourage all professors to consider using them. Your students will thank you later, hopefully, and they hopefully will take away a lot of knowledge from your course and learn and learn and learn.
Yeah, I think if I can be almost a little satirical here, it's like your students will love you more if you're not making them pay for a textbook or encouraging them to pay for a super expensive textbook. I think using like something like an OER or using an open educational resource is a really great way to kind of set the stage on syllabus day when you're like, okay, guys, like this is our great textbook that you don't have to pay for. So you kind of kill two birds with one stone there, and really set the pace for making a good relationship, giving them a great resource, and one that is not going to burn a hole in their pocket.
I would say that a big part of college is really just to broaden your knowledge, right? And have a more like well-rounded like experience. Like even if you're an engineering major, like you should be able to take arts or humanities and have like a very well-rounded like perspective, right? And education. And I think by having OER resources, that makes it a lot more accessible for students to branch out of like maybe their traditional path and to learn like something that they would have never learned otherwise. And I think when you add like a financial like aspect to it, it makes those classes obviously like it puts a barrier for a lot of classes for a lot of students. So that's what I would say about OER resources.
Yeah, for me, I would just say, like, kind of similar to what everyone's been saying, it's that, students are paying thousands upon thousands of dollars, tuition, rent, housing if it's a dorm, or food, dining hall, all of this. And to push you, and, students are going to school for their career aspirations, but then to be in a classroom and being told, okay, you can only be successful in this class or learn in this class if you pay like $130 up front, or if you pay like this much money to access this pack-back resource. It's honestly kind of a little bit discouraging because it's like, well, what am I paying this money for? What are my parents paying this money for? What are my scholarships paying for? If I have to, get into my own pocket and have to afford these resources, it's discouraging, and it creates a learning environment that lacks accessibility. And like Robert's saying, there are students in those classrooms that maybe if the textbook is optional, are not buying the textbook and are comparatively doing worse than other students. It creates this inequality in classrooms. And so it kind of just seems like a nonsense option to pick like open education resources, to prioritize student accessibility and affordability, and create learning environments that are conducive to collaboration and immersion and sort of just allowing students to be like, okay, you guys are paying this much money, but in this classroom, you're learning and you're really getting what you're paying for. It's just something that I feel like is like a nonsense option and just makes a no-nonsense option and makes complete sense.
And something that I really want to note is that open educational resources extends way beyond textbooks.
Yeah.
There are so many different opportunities for open educational resources to be present in courses, and it doesn't always stem from a textbook. It's really great if it's a textbook, but there are so many options for open education.
Just by a show of hands on the panel, how many of you have not bought a textbook for a course that you took? Okay, so I know we have a lot of students in the room. How many of you have not bought a textbook for a course you've been in? Anyone? Every single student in here has not purchased a textbook for a course that they've been in, and a required textbook, correct? Yeah. Yeah, that's the reality, right? That's the reality, is that sometimes you just can't. So on the flip side of that, how many of you on the panel, and then we'll go out to the crowd again, how many of you have had courses that used library reserves for your courses? Yeah? All three of them. Fantastic. What about out here? How many people out here have used library reserves? Where you log in and you can get your textbook or your readings and they came from the library? No? One? Okay, great. So yeah, so if you don't know, that's a service that we provide. And we are trying very hard now to purchase every single textbook that faculty require, if we can. Sometimes they're not available, but if we can get an unlimited license on a textbook, Texas A&M libraries are automatically purchasing that textbook. So I would encourage you all next semester to check the library before you go to the bookstore and spend that money, because we may have already purchased that book for you. I think we're over $3 million now in course savings for students through that purchasing program. So we are trying to raise awareness of that, just like we're trying to learn about the awareness and raise awareness of the open education marker in the Howdy portal for students, so that they can look for that when they're registering for classes. So before we end and we go to, if anybody has questions, is there anything else that you just, not just to professors, but anything else you just think would be important to say about textbooks, affordability, course materials, any of that kind of stuff?
There's no shame in it. Like, there's free things are good things, especially when it comes to like how expensive this place can get. You know, there's no shame in asking for help and getting help and being a prof that gets help or being a student that gets help. We're here. It's a learning community. It's a learning environment. We're here to learn together and build on each other. So.
Yeah, and to add to that, like, nobody's really doing any learning if we can't afford the textbooks and if we can't afford learning resources. And so, again, just makes complete sense to pursue a education where students are being able to accessibly learn and gain knowledge, like Kimmy was talking about earlier. So yeah, just seems like the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and open educational resources can really have an impact on the students here on this campus. Lives can be changed because they get the access to one textbook. Their knowledge can gain so much, and it's just amazing to think of the different ways that students can be impacted by open educational resources. And I encourage professors and students alike to really think of the implications that open educational resources can have within your courses and on your universities.
All right, so do we have any questions? Anyone? We will bring the microphone to you. Come on, there's got to be one question. We've got a great panel here. They've got great answers.
Maybe we just answer the questions.
Oh,
well.
we've got one.
Oh. Spoke too soon.
We're passing it. it's on, but it's only going into the
Besides economic or monetary benefits, what are some other benefits to having open educational resources being provided in classrooms?
I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but again, you kind of just get like a really well-rounded education if professors aren't just using like one textbook or one like costly, like discussion website or one, whatever it might be. You kind of get like a world of opportunity in how you get to teach a course. Aside from that, you get to use important institutions like the library that really provide resources to like everybody, provides a space for everybody, and so supporting the library, supporting university libraries, it really just keeps like this accessibility going for people who maybe it's not common for them to go to the bookstore to buy books. And so again, like one, it creates a really great learning environment. Two, allows systems like the library to keep going. But yeah.
Yeah, and on top of that, I would say open educational resources also really help expose you to a lot of literature. Something that I've seen in all my open educational resource courses is that a lot of those professors don't just select one type of textbook or one source. They select multiple types because they want those students to experience as much literature as they possibly can. So I've gotten exposure to the narratives and expository texts that have really enabled me to learn more and more in my courses.
To build upon that, one of my classes is really cool that like I learn personally better through like stories or like real life examples. So what she does is that every time we learn a concept in class, she'll like post an article about that class online or on Canvas. So I can go to like my module section, and when I'm studying for an exam, I'll read that article. Or even she'll talk about it a little bit in class, so I'll remember those stories and those articles. And that for me, I've seen like, for me, like I forget things really easily. So I have to study a lot before my exams. But through having that, I've realized that I just remember things easier just because I have that resource. And I didn't even know that that was like a good way for me to learn. I learned that through her doing that for that class.
I guess like on the written side and like the compiling side, since I am like working specifically on a textbook, it's obviously this is going to be different for every resource out there, but it's a lot more than just like one person like writing this and dedicating this. So you get a kind of different perspectives. And to my understanding, like students, I think helping again makes it kind of digestible for other students because you know kind of how to speak the language still of a student. So I think in that like digestibility and accessibility way, like just comprehensibility.
Just really quickly to add on to that, what Robert and Dylan have been talking about is like these different perspectives. Like I found that in classes where I had to buy the textbook and was only referring to the textbook for my writings or my readings, I found that I was kind of lacking with just like more broad perspective. And then in classes where I was able to like connect different pieces of literature or like different readings, I was able to kind of have like an increased appreciation for different perspectives and like see like, okay, this is what this party might think, but this group thinks this way. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of open educational resources is because they are openly licensed. Even if it is not a textbook that your professor has created, they can take that openly licensed textbook and they can customize it so that it reflects the students in their classroom, and they can add in. We have the Texas education where you have to have like the Texas history pieces that we can take those open education resources and we can kind of remix them and we can add material to them so that they're reflective of the students who are sitting in those classrooms and that they resonate with those students. So you're not learning something that's so detached from what is familiar to you. And I think that's really important, but at the same time can give you that multiplicity of experiences from different places. So I think that is a really good benefit of OER. Any other questions? Oh.
Okay, so as students, the students' most important, if that's the right word, relationship to OER, is that through the Howdy portal? Just looking up classes. Oh, OER.
Yeah, I think that Well, just talking about Howdy Portal, I think that it can sometimes look and feel a little bit outdated. Again, like I kind of mentioned, I didn't really realize there was even an OER button until my last registration cycle, which was last fall. And so, yeah, I guess that's a really good way of putting it. Where like my first interaction with OER is like seeing it in Howdy or reading through the syllabus. But yeah.
And off the top of y'all's heads, what would be the best way to inform students about OER?
Great question.
I think from a student government perspective, it's being able to advocate and being able to share information. Here at the university, we like to say that students inform students the best. So definitely student interactions is a great way. But also, I think the university libraries as well have been making an amazing effort to connect students with open educational resources. And I've seen the amazing work they're doing with their emails, with their advertising, with their marketing, and just being present within our libraries to share with students of the amazing things that open educational resources offer.
I think, yeah, student to student is kind of where it's going to start, because I know plenty of students who aren't going to read their emails.
Yeah.
But when I tell them, like, guys, like, there's an open educational resource thing, and you're paying that much for a textbook? Like, what do you mean? Like, let me introduce you to my friend over here. So yeah.
Yeah, I think also. Sorry, go. Okay. I think also encouraging professors, again, like on this end of it, being like, okay, guys, like OER is really important. Open education resources is really important to students. You guys should implement it into your classrooms, into your learning environments, and then thus encouraging them to let their students know that the class that they're taking is an open education resource class, that they're using open education resources, and then obviously inserting that intention behind it. About accessibility, about affordability, and letting students know that this is something that professors can offer and that they should offer, and that professors should be examples to each other, and then also showcase that to students that are in their classrooms and in these learning environments.
Yeah, I agree with Iman. I think a really cool way would be like when you're in classes, because I've definitely taken open education resources, like on resource classes, like unknowingly. So like if the professor maybe starts at the beginning, like when we're doing syllabus review day, and was like, oh, this is an open education resource class, or maybe even just mention resources the library has, like, oh, this textbook is offered through the library reserves, and making that known to students. Like I was even talking, I think I was talking with you about it, how the, but how the biology textbooks are actually offered through the library. So, and I remember that because I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to take a biology class, but I did not want to pay all that. But yeah, now I know that it's actually offered through the library. And I think it would be really cool if like professors maybe at the beginning of class told students that, hey, like this thing, open education resources are out there and you can use them.
So in the Howdy portal, when they list classes, so there's a class list and somewhere it says OER. Is that how it's designated?
Yes.
And is it those initials, OER?
So let me take this one real quick. We are working as we're in the Open Education Department here in the libraries. We're fairly new. We've only been here almost a year. We're getting ready to celebrate our 1-year anniversary, and we're working very closely. We have a campus committee, and we're working with the registrar's office to make that clearer, because how many people know what OER is if I just say OER, right? And so one of the things that So one of the things that we're working on, and just like a poll of hands, if you think this would be a better designation, low cost, no cost. Right. So that's what we're working on as we're working with the registrar's office and the OER campus committee, which Robert sits on the OER campus committee. So he's been involved in a lot of these conversations. So we do have the student voice there from SGA, which we're very appreciative of, because if you don't work with open education resources every day, all of the acronyms around OER and OEP, open educational practices, and open pedagogy and all that kind of stuff means nothing to you. But if I say, if you take this class, it's going to be low cost, no cost, meaning that your course materials are going to be under $50, that means something to you, right? Okay, good. Good. Then we know we are on the right track, right, Robert? And I'd also like to say that I completely understand that we have to have these student voices. That's why when we were planning, this is our very first open education week here at Texas A&M, and my first thing is we have to have a student panel, because not only are you the advocates for this with other students, telling your roommate that, oh, you need to have open education resources or whatever, or look in the Howdy portal for the OER, which is what it is right now. But also, I think it's really important to hear students talk about the real world impacts of this material, of the cost of course materials, so that professors can see that, you know, sometimes you just don't, you teach in a class, you're picking up somebody else's prep, you're just going to go with their book. I think it's really important for them to understand that a lot of thought needs to be put into not just what is going to be the best book for this course, but what is going to be the best book for the students in my course. And so that brings me to like my final question, and then we'll ask any more audience questions. Have you felt at any point in any of your classes that have used open education resources that the quality of the material was lacking in those courses?
No.
No.
I can't say so.
No, yeah. I had a class last semester with Professor Isaac Blackson in Mass Media and Politics, and we're reading like pieces of literature from philosophers and like writers like Susan Sontag and Michel Foucault and Edward Said, and I felt extremely immersed into the readings that we were doing, and I felt like my perspectives were broadening, and I was reading texts that people much older than me talk about all the time, and it felt completely opposite of lacking. It felt really amazing, really awesome, and it was just truly like made me feel like I was like, okay, wait, I'm in college, like I'm learning, my brain's expanding, and such feelings. Yeah.
And just to like add on to that experience, like I had one history class, 'cause I feel like a lot of accessible resources tend to also be like the most like unique kind of resources. So like you remember that and you internalize it more. Like I had one history professor who like it was U.S. history, and everything we learned about, every site we learned about, she had already been there. So she would have pictures there with like her family and her kids. So like I just remembered, I internalized a lot of things. Like I took U.S. history in high school, did not remember that much to be honest. But I remember a lot from that class because she's told such like personal stories about them.
I found the readings for my English and cross-listed film class, the readings that we did were from an open educational resource, and they were really engaging. Like it was readings I wanted to do, not readings that I had to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic. So any other final questions from our audience? Anybody? Anyone? Going once, going twice? All right. Well, I would really like to thank Iman, Kemi, Dylan, and Robert for agreeing to serve on our first ever student open education resources and affordability panel. I hope you all learned a lot. I learned a lot. And it's really great to hear student voices and to highlight student voices in this movement because it's so important. I would also like to just mention before we close that SGA is such a great partner for us in open education resources and the advocacy that they do, including faculty awards for open education resources. So Robert, can you mention a little bit about the faculty awards?
Yes, so the Student Government Association every year has what we call the Open Educational Resource Awards. It's our way of thanking our professors who use open educational resources and awarding them. There's an award and typically a monetary gift as well. And it's kind of our way of saying we see what you're doing in our courses and we thank you. So we celebrate your work within our courses and your work at our university.
And 4 of those awards come from student nominations. So your students are paying attention. For the faculty who are watching this, your students are paying attention and they're nominating you for these awards because it matters to them. And the 5th award is a faculty award that is nominated by other faculty. And the awards are, they have a party too, not just a plaque and some monetary amount, but there's a party. So
yes, this year's will be March 26th at 4 p.m. in the Hotel and Conference, and it's going to be a great time. We have a banquet set up and planned already, and we're so excited to go and thank our professors and really give those awards out to those professors that have really impacted our journey here at this university.
Yeah, I got to go last year. I wasn't officially working here yet, but I happened to be in town, and it was such an incredible event. I was so impressed with not just completely student run, completely student led, but also how deeply appreciative the students were, but also how deeply appreciative the faculty were that their work was recognized. So I would just encourage you to keep an eye out for those awards next year as they come around, nominations come around, and if you're a student, nominate your professor. If you have a faculty member in your department who's doing a lot with OER, please nominate them as well, because it's a great way to celebrate the success of open education resources at Texas A&M. And with that, I'm going to close the panel, and I thank you all for coming, and I thank you all for being here on this panel and agreeing to do this. We really appreciate it, and I hope you guys all have a great night. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. One more time for the majors.
Yes, I'm a junior education major.
I am an English major, philosophy minor.
I'm a sophomore psychology major.
And I'm a sophomore political science major.
Thank you all.